Animals' leaders guitarist Tosin Abasi talked about his fondness of the extended range, naming musicians that drew him to that world, as well as revealing why he prefers the extended range over standard 6-string guitars. The musician said during an interview with Guitar Center, "Guys like Steve Vai and even bands like Korn started using extended range guitar, and when I started playing 7-string, I didn't really know much music theory, so I was very much into just exploring the fretboard and hearing cool sounds. It didn't necessarily throw me off to have an extra string. I was just writing riffs and I noticed that there were more riffs to be written. Once I started to really understand the fretboard, I realized there were a lot of advantages to having more than 6 strings with chord voicings, tapping and arpeggio shapes. I stayed on a 7-string for 5 or 6 years until Meshuggah put out an album called Nothing and it was 8-string guitar. It was the first time I ever heard it and I was like, what is even happening? You have the benefit of a wider range of frequencies, so you don't feel like you're just writing necessarily one part or one range of the spectrum. You feel like you can actually write for bass as well as in the treble area. And then the last feature, you can incorporate bass technique. So I do a lot of slap and thumping and it just sounds really aggressive and powerful on the lower strings. So, perfect storm." Ibanez was always visible because of the players I was learning from and really looking up to, Vai and Satriani. Experimentally playing the guitars, I really liked the flat radius, the thin necks, they were just like shred guitars. They played faster. They were super comfortable. I liked the aesthetics. They were always a brand that I naturally wanted to play, and then, paralleling my growth as far as getting into extended range, they were one of the first major manufacturers to do a 7-string guitar, and it's a great instrument. I feel like they actually helped to validate the extended range guitar because of how well they make the instruments in the first place.
You kind of told me a little bit about this when I started the Meshuggah show, but I don't know how much you can say on here, but like how this whole idea came about.
Oh, you know, it was kind of emerged out of a conversation about like, what's the next step for me? And, you know, we've put out 4 albums and I had probably just done 200 shows that year. And I was like, damn, like, I love performing, but I don't want it to be like an obligation monetarily. I want it to be like a passion thing.
Yeah, you don't like, I have to play these shows or else I'm gonna be homeless kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because there are popular bands who should be like making revenue from selling music, but no one really pays for music anymore.
Yeah.
So then they have to make up the difference by like whoring themselves out in various other ways, like. Or, I mean, that's an extreme way of putting it, but you basically have to, like, you pick up that slack elsewhere. Like, well, what else can I do? Because now, like, I can't even monetize my art, you know, in the same direct way. So, but it was actually more of the fact that, like, I love designing guitars. I have a lot of custom-built guitars. Part of the reason is because I play 8 strings and fan frets and ergonomic guitars. I didn't even have the options to buy it from Gibson or Fender, any of my favorite guys. And even at the time when I started doing it, Ibanez wasn't even really fucking with that sort of thing. So it was like finding these luthiers online and commissioning guitars. So I kind of honed my chops building custom instruments, and then I basically designed my own. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was with Ibanez, and they were like gracious enough to be like, cool, we'll add your design to our catalog. So I'm like, dude, that's landmark. Like, Ibanez is the one company I've endorsed on guitars, like, my whole career. Like, and they make my favorite guitars. And they've kept artists for a long time. Like, George Benson has been there for freaking decades. Mm-hmm. Vai has been there for decades. So I'm like, they know how to treat their artists. But I did hit a bit of a snag when I realized, like, I was doing some crazy shit. Like, I wanted an asymmetrical neck, you know. They had never produced that. And I wanted, like, you know, there's like just a range of design features that didn't fall comfortably within their.
Now, is this something where you are just a student of how these instruments work and have a really fundamental understanding of why a neck is this way, why a body is, why this wood works? Is it something you have a fundamental understanding of, or you just kind of felt like you were never totally comfortable with things you had gotten and these are just new ideas that popped up?
It's both. I think the guitar as
because I don't know shit, by the way, about guitars. I'm just like, yo, I don't know nothing.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, what I really like about the guitar is that the design is essentially the same as it was from conception, right? and people have been able to utilize this tool to express themselves without really being hindered by the tool. So like when it came to the point where it's like, oh, well, I want a tremolo that bends in both positions, Floyd Rose came along, and Steve Vai thought, hey, let's like hollow out the space underneath the Floyd so I can pull it in the up position even further. So you have these design additions, but essentially the electric guitar is like frets, neck, wood. Now, the 8-string guitar doesn't fit neatly within the like design purview of the original guitar, because now it has a range that extends into bass territory. Well, why do basses have longer necks than guitars? It's like, look at a mandolin and then look at a violin and then look at a cello and then look at an upright bass. Like, it's not an arbitrary change in size for fun. Frequencies have a physical reality that is basically manifests itself on length of string, right? So there's scale lengths that like are in a more optimized zone for the frequency. It's why when you try to tune a Les Paul down to, you know, F, it's going to sound flubby, but if you get a baritone neck, it's going to sound tighter, right? So the 8-string guitar didn't get the same level of consideration as I thought it needed, and I think more small, you know, like luthiers were able to say, like, you know, guys like Charlie Novak's innovated the multi-scale thing. But like you couldn't go to Jackson and get a multi-scale guitar in 2008. You still can't go to Gibson and get it. Like, so basically it created this space where I honed some chops as far as optimizing the extended range guitar. Cause I think Leo Fender and freaking, they got it right? There's like, and even the RG, Steve Vai, you know, designing that, like that was kind of the next sort of evolution of the electric guitar. I was just like, hey, Ibanez, it's cool that you've made this 27-inch scale length 8-string guitar, but I think it should be multi-scale. I also think, like, ergonomically speaking, like we could kind of set the neck deeper into the body, and we can shrink the body so that it feels more surmountable. We can narrow the string spacing so that if you compound that over 8 strings, you actually get like a thinner neck, because 2 millimeters between each string times 8 becomes like a very noticeable width, right? There's stuff like that, and then there's aesthetic contributions I wanted to make, where I was just like, I love guitars that look like, you know, furniture, but I really like, you know, McLarens and
Abasi,
Audis.
the IKEA of guitars.
Yeah. I think consumers are very responsive to design that's seamless and invisible, and like,
well, that's the whole Apple model, right?
Exactly. And I was like, so the first iteration of the Abasi guitar was actually like very similar to the iPhone 5, I think, where there's polished, like there's like a matte satin thing, and then there's black glass. It's all black, but there's a difference in the finish. And so you get this really cool textural difference, but it's a monochromatic look. And it looks very like forward, you know what I mean? So that's kind of why, eventually, through prototyping with Ibanez, I hit up some snags that were just like indicative of the scale of their production. It's like, oh, you want to move the parallel fret or the vertical fret from the 12th fret to the 8th fret now? Okay, well, we'll get you a sample in 4 months.
Yeah, it's too. Their operation is almost too big to handle something this like out of the box.
Exactly, and they actually tried. We were prototyping for multiple years, so they were awesome.
Were they frustrated with that process?
I think they would have been stoked if I was just like, yeah, throw the wizard neck on it. Let's call it a day. Like, because, you know, most of the custom guitars they release are like variants of existing production models. I was designing something from the ground up, and beyond that, I was asking them to do things they had never done before. Like, I wanted an asymmetrical neck because I felt like it was an experiment, you know, and I'm going with a symmetrical neck now, but there was precedent for me to think that you didn't necessarily need a symmetrical neck as the like uniform approach to the 8-string. Like, what if it got thinner as you approach the top? For if you needed to bar all those strings, do you really want a bunch of like thickness up there, or is it even necessary? So I was kind of trying to make the most playable 8-string, and they were totally down, but it was just like the length of time between each prototype created a close to a 3-year process. And eventually I was also like very much aware that people wanted 6-string versions, or they wanted headless versions, or they didn't want a black one. They wanted Koa, or they wanted a flame maple top. And I knew that with Ibanez, like, the way they work is that there would be one fixed model that you can order. That's it. and if you factor in the supply or the whole chain of retail, where it's like there's one cost to manufacture it, and then there's one cost for Ibanez to acquire it, then it's one cost to acquire like the OEM stuff, and by the time like you have locking tuners, when it reaches the consumer, your distributors marked it up and then your retailers marked it up. The locking tuners have quadrupled in cost to the consumer, and I'm not despairing Ibanez. This is actually the dynamic of anything you buy in a store. You're not paying the real price for it. You're paying like a negotiated, inflated price that is necessary for it to reach you in Best Buy right. So they're not doing anything wrong in that regard, but the internet and technology is allowed for options as far as manufacturing goods and reaching people with those goods. And I just started to realize like, wait, I actually own this design. I'm experiencing a bit of like, barriers to fulfillment with Ibanez that are just intrinsic in the process. It would be smarter for me to actually just like put it out on my own. I've been with Ibanez for over 10 years. I know what that relationship's like. More power to them, and I thank them for everything they've done with me. But I was like, my next step in evolution, probably this is it,
So I imagine you put yourself full tilt into this project. This is probably one of the biggest things you've done in your life.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like, I'm not going to say I'm not a business person, but I'm not a business person.
Well, I'd say as far as musicians are concerned, you seem to be a lot more geared in that mentality. Like, you seem like you have a certain amount of discipline. You seem like you know what you want. And you're also one of the key elements, which is why I think this is why, businesses have different people that serve different roles,
yes.
So it seems like from a design capacity, you have what's going on. Ultimately, you're the face of the company. So you have that going for you as far as selling it and just having this being an extension of your personal brand. But listen, no one does anything on their own. It's like did you watch that documentary with Dr. Dre and the
Defiant ones?
Yeah, the Defiant
I
ones.
haven't seen it, but I've heard it's really good.
It's great, but it tells you about a partnership, about how one guy does these things really well and another person does these things really well. But then you put that together in something.
Well, dude, you've experienced it being in a band. It's like, are you supposed to write all the music, perform it, but also like book the shows and make sure there's merch at the like a week into the gigs?
Well,
and like,
I have worn many hats.
Yeah, you're doing that because
I don't like it.
It would be better if you could retain your bandwidth to be an artist and deliberate to someone who can't write the music you write.
Yeah.
But you're doing it out of necessity. So like that's how our business is structured. I have a luthier who he developed the Fishman Fluence pickups,
My roommate has those, and he swears by them. Says
they're insane.
Pickups.
You should holler. Are you active guy or?
No, I haven't been really using. I have some. I just got some Lundgren M7s, and those are amazing.
I like Lundgrens,
but I would definitely love to.
Well, put it this way: there's every car you could name, and then there's the Tesla.
Yeah.
It still has four wheels. It still gets you from point A to point B, but it accelerates faster than any like car in production.
Well, I'll say this, bro. He rolled up here in a very nice car. I'm not gonna say what it was, and a nice roar to it, but it was not a Tesla. Hence the roar.
Yeah, I am.
Where's the Tesla, bro?
No, dude, I'm not ready to give up on the combustion engine. The more cylinders, the better. I'm pushing V10 right now.
He's a man.
And a manual transmission made it to a V10.
Oh, I could tell it was manual. I was looking at that guy over there.
We'll go for a ride.
All right.
I've actually gotten 3 speeding tickets in the past month, so I might not be able to keep it.
I would say brothers need to stay within the legal limits. Do not give them, First off, if you're driving like a sports car, you already.